Video games have been with us for quite a while. It has advanced quickly from the first video game made from cathode ray tubes amusement device to high advanced graphics and high definition television. Video games can also bring in more jobs, and it's not restricted to a seasonal job. Let people be able to be ingested into fantasies of games and is able to bring people together. Yet, even though it has come this far in technology, there are still problems with how it is affecting people's psychology, causing people to become violent and can possibly get addicted to playing them too much. With the positives and negatives coming from this one invention, it sure has its benefits and its negatives. But is it really needed for our society? I will tell you all the things that has happened with video games and what is needed to answer my essential question. My essential question is, how much of an impact has video games created on society since video games were first invented in 1947? What I mean by this is, what type of impacts that has affected anyone who has played these games and what outcomes has come from it. Video games were first created with a cathode ray tube amusement device in 1947, which is the first known video game, and it was about firing airborne targets. Let's fast forward to 1958 to a game called Tennis for Two, which used an oscilloscope and an analog computer, and it is a precursor to Pong. This game, unlike Pong, used net and the ball uses gravity to simulate actual tennis matches. In 1972, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney created Atari Incorporated. The game they released was Pong, and because it was so popular, it sold 19,000 arcade machines, and it helped create many imitators for it all. After the crash of 1977, which put the end of the older and obsolete consoles and Pong imitators, came the golden age of arcade games, which took from 1978 to 1986, where everyone was going to arcades and games were being made almost every month. The industry was growing rapidly to where annual revenue was $5 million were made yearly, and $8 million were made in quarters in 1982. Even though this was a great time for the industry, it soon had to fall down. That time came when in 1983 the video game industry grew too large to hold itself, and the bubble burst. This was known as the crash that could have ended video games as we know it. There was popular lore that Atari 2600 game E.T. the Extraterrestrial sales were so bad that over 1 million extra cartridges they were supposedly buried here in Alamogordo, New Mexico. It wasn't until 2 years later that Nintendo released its first console, which was a shock that helped revive the industry from being gone forever. They created the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. With this console, it started the third generation of consoles and dominated the homes until in 1995, where it was discontinued. Sega created the Sega Genesis, and Nintendo released the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, aka SNES, which now started the transition from 8-bit era to the 16-bit era. Even though during this era there was more and better graphics, there was also controversy during this time. One was the violent graphics that now can be depicted, and the games that caused this was Mortal Kombat and its fatalities. This and other games helped push for a rating system that can prevent kids from buying violent video games, so the ESRB rating system was created. During 1993 to 2006, 5th generation gaming consoles were created. There were new consoles that helped push the industry even further. The Nintendo 64 brought the world of 64-bit and created 3D type of games, where now it is not limited to looking at games at 2D point of view, and you could look anywhere in the video game. Plus, Sony entered the video game industry with the PlayStation. This was the last era where the cartridges were last used, and went into the transition to CD-based consoles. From 1998 to this year, there were a series of consoles and games that helped push the industry more forward to an industry and games that is here today. Microsoft entered the industry with the Xbox during the 6th generation and released Halo Combat Evolved, which helped its success in its console history. The Xbox was the first by using PC technology in its internal system. It also helped launch the online multiplayer, which also Sony launches for the PlayStation 2. What is also great about video games is how much interactivity you can be, and how close you can be to the main character and choose what actions you want your character to do. It helps us be released into these fantasies that we may never experience in our lifetime. So we can be a heroic soldier about to save the earth, or someone who is trying to make it big in a company they always wanted to be in. Also, to some people, this is the type of art form where people who makes this can express themselves through this way instead of writing a book or making a movie. Lastly, the video game industry is also the fastest growing industry right now. We know this because it actually surpassed the movie industry in sales by $45 million. Since this is growing rapidly, this industry can help bring in new jobs which are going to help bring the economy really well. What can be the downfall with video games is that how much violence people are exposed, and not only it make it worse, that people can now be able to commit the violence and feel satisfied about it in the video game. A study showed that out of the 130,296 research participants, it had found that violent video games desensitized them, and they also had an increase in aggressive behavior. Another example is that kids are getting addicted to video games. The study observed 1,178 children in the U.S. and found out that at least 9% of the kids were addicted to it, though about 23% of the kids felt addicted to video games. While they also show that kids between 8 to 12 years plays 13 hours of video games, while kids between 13 to 18 plays 14 hours of video games. Plus, there was another study that shows video games can stunt the growth of the brain. They experimented with kids playing video games and the other kids doing simple math. They saw that kids playing video games only stimulated the movement of the vision part of the brain, while the kids doing simple math stimulated the whole frontal lobe of the brain. Even though video games does have its benefits, it also has its negatives. I think it can help us go further into the future and bring people together. Also, how people can be dragged into fantasies of video games and be part of the game itself. But people are stunning their brains by playing video games while the brains is still developing. Also, it is getting our kids to be addicted to video games and the violence these kids are being exposed to.